The sun was gentle that morning. A soft breeze moved through the trees in Danielle Rucker's front yard. Brushing against the wind chimes she hung outside her porch. They sang a quiet, peaceful tune, the kind that made you want to close your eyes and breathe a little deeper. Danielle had just finished her morning workout. She always trained early, a habit she brought home from the military. The routine kept her focused, grounded. She wore a gray tank top and cargo pants, her braided hair pulled into a neat bun. Sweat clung to her forehead, but she felt good, alive, strong, calm. Her two dogs, Rex and Nova, were in the yard with her. Big, powerful, and loyal German shepherds trained by the U.S. military, just like her. They didn't bark unless there was a reason. They didn't run unless commanded. They were her family now, her protection, her peace. Danielle grabbed a bottle of water from her porch table and sat on the steps. She looked at her phone, scrolling through a few messages, mostly from other veterans. Every now and then, she'd help someone who was struggling. PTSD, joblessness, loneliness. She knew the weight of silence, so she tried to be the voice that answered when others called. Today felt like a good day, the kind of day where nothing dramatic happens, the kind of day where a veteran could enjoy the quiet. But then, a low hum in the distance broke that stillness. At first, Danielle thought it was a delivery truck, but the sound grew louder and angrier. It was sirens. She stood slowly, heart tightening just a little. Rex and Nova lifted their heads, ears pointed forward. Alert, not alarmed yet, but watching. Two police cruisers turned the corner of her street, then a third. They weren't driving like they were responding to a call down the block. They were coming fast and directly toward her house. Danielle blinked. What the hell? She whispered. The cars screeched to a stop just outside her driveway. Four officers jumped out with their hands on their weapons. One had already drawn his gun. Hey, step away from the dogs! Hands where we can see 'em! Danielle didn't move, not because she was defiant, but because she was stunned. Her own front yard. No warning, no explanation, just weapons and yelling. Nova growled low. Rex stood beside her, silent but steady. Danielle raised her hands slowly, her voice firm but calm. This is my home, she said. I live here. What's going on? Don't move, another officer shouted. We got a call about a black female trespassing, armed and dangerous with dogs. Danielle's breath caught. She was the trespasser in her own driveway? The accusation wrapped around her chest like barbed wire. It wasn't just wrong, it was terrifying and familiar. She'd faced danger before. In Iraq, there were moments she thought she wouldn't come back. Bullets overhead, bombs underfoot. But this was different. This was home. This was supposed to be safe. She looked again at the officers, all white, all tense, all ready to act. Not one of them had asked for ID. Not one of them had bothered to ask her name. Just a black woman in cargo pants, with two big dogs. That was enough, apparently. Danielle's hands were still raised. She could feel her pulse in her ears. Listen, she said slower this time. My name is Danielle Rucker. I'm a United States Army veteran. This is my property. Those dogs are military trained. Back off, please. But they didn't listen. One officer stepped forward. His hand trembled slightly on his gun. Rex moved in front of her. Nova growled louder. Danielle didn't give the command. They were trained to sense threat. And right now, her dogs saw four of them. Get those dogs under control or we will fire, the officer screamed. Danielle's voice rose sharply. No one is touching them. They're not attacking you. They're protecting me. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. A single drop of sweat slid down Danielle's cheek. Her heart was pounding now. She had survived war zones, watched brothers in arms fall beside her, seen fear in enemy eyes. But never had she felt this kind of helplessness. Because this wasn't war. This was racism. This was home. And still, it wasn't safe. The officers stayed frozen, their hands tight on their weapons, eyes locked on the two German shepherds now standing in front of Danielle. The growl coming from Nova's throat was deep and steady, not loud, but clear. A warning. Rex didn't growl. He simply stood still, his thick body between Danielle and the officers, muscles tense, gaze fixed. Danielle didn't lower her hands. I said, she repeated, her voice even, though her heart raced. This is my property. I served 2 tours in Iraq. These are military K-9s. Please explain why you're here. And do not point that gun at me. One of the officers, younger, maybe in his 20s, stepped back slightly. His eyes darted toward the others, unsure. But the officer in front, the one yelling orders, refused to back down. His face was red, sweat gathering at his temple. We got a 911 call, he said, voice sharp, about a suspicious black woman breaking into this home with aggressive dogs, matching your description. You need to calm those animals down right now. Danielle narrowed her eyes. And who made that call? She asked. You didn't even ask for ID. You just came here ready to shoot. The officer didn't answer. Instead, he barked into his radio. Requesting backup. Possible threat. Suspect has trained attack dogs. Danielle's mouth dropped open. I'm a vet, she said slowly, the words heavy with disbelief. I served this country, and now you're calling me a threat on my own property? Behind her, Nova stepped forward, just one small step, but enough to make the officers flinch. Their fingers twitched near their triggers. Danielle's body tensed. Nova, Rex, stand down, she commanded. The dogs instantly froze, still alert, still guarding. But they obeyed. Danielle lowered her hands slightly, just enough to reach into her back pocket with slow, deliberate motion. Don't, one of the officers barked. Keep your hands up. I'm getting my ID, she said calmly. You want to know who I am? Here it is. She pulled out her wallet and held it up. No sudden moves, no aggression. The officer closest to her snatched it and opened it. His eyes paused, then widened slightly. U.S. Army, veteran, Danielle Rucker. Honorable discharge. Her address matched the home behind her. He looked at her again, then at the other officers. There was a long pause. No one spoke. Just the sound of the wind and the distant chatter of birds in the trees. The sirens were gone now, replaced by silence and shame. Danielle took a deep breath. You see it now? She said softly. I belong here. I fought for this place, for this country. And yet, I'm standing in my own driveway, treated like a criminal. A neighbor peeked out from behind a curtain across the street. Another stepped out onto their porch watching, phone in hand. One more came out, then 2. People were noticing. The officer who held her ID finally spoke, his voice lower. We got a report. We have to respond. Danielle shook her head slowly. But did you have to respond with guns drawn? Did you have to shout, to point your weapon at me, before even asking who I was? Another officer stepped forward. He looked older, more experienced. He sighed deeply and said, You're right. This wasn't handled well. Danielle looked him in the eyes. This wasn't just not well. This was dangerous. For me. For my dogs. For you. Nova growled again, a softer growl now, sensing her emotion. The lead officer's face had changed. His voice had none of the shouting left. I didn't know, he mumbled. We were told someone was breaking in. And the fact that I was black made that believable enough? Danielle asked, her voice cracking slightly. He didn't answer. Rex let out a soft chuff. Danielle reached down and touched his head gently, her fingers brushing his fur. Then another police car pulled up. From it stepped a tall, commanding figure in a darker uniform, a higher-ranking officer. He took one look at the scene, Danielle standing with two calm, powerful dogs beside her, four officers looking tense and confused, and walked straight over. "What's going on here?" he asked. Danielle didn't wait for them to explain. She looked him in the eye and said, "I was surrounded by your officers in my own driveway, with guns drawn, because I matched a description. All they saw was a black woman with dogs. They didn't ask questions. They didn't knock. They assumed." The officer nodded slowly, listening. "Ma'am," he said, "I'm deeply sorry. I'll personally review the call and the body cam footage. This should have been handled differently." Danielle's voice was firmer now. "I don't want an apology. I want accountability." He nodded again. "Understood." A few minutes later, the officers began to pull back. They said nothing as they left. Danielle stood there, shoulders square, heart still pounding. Nova leaned against her leg. Rex sat at her feet. The day had started quiet, but peace for Danielle Rucker was always borrowed time. After the last police car rolled away, Danielle stood still in the driveway, unable to move. Not yet. Her breath was steady now, but her body still felt tense, like the memory of danger hadn't quite left her muscles. It was the same feeling she used to have after patrols overseas, when she made it back to base, but her mind was still out there, ducking behind a wall, checking rooftops, counting seconds between gunshots. Rex nuzzled her leg softly. Nova looked up at her, eyes alert but calm. They could tell she wasn't okay. Not yet. Trained to sense stress, pain, fear. They never needed words. Danielle finally walked up the steps to her front door. She opened it slowly, stepping into her quiet home. The light from outside poured across her living room floor, warm and golden. Nothing inside had changed. Same couch, same photos, same scent of the cinnamon candle she liked to burn. But Danielle had changed. Again. She sat on the couch and let her body sink deep into the cushions. Rex sat beside her. Nova laid her head on Danielle's lap. Danielle ran a hand over Nova's fur and stared at the wall for a long time. Then her eyes drifted to the framed picture on the shelf. Her in uniform, standing beside her squad, dusty and smiling in the desert sun. That was a lifetime ago, but the emotions were still fresh. I've faced IEDs, mortar fire, ambushes, but I never felt like this. Not like I did today. That was the thought that played over and over in her head. In Iraq, there was always fear, but there was also trust. You had a team. You had a plan. You had a purpose. Here in her own front yard, she was alone, labeled a threat before she even spoke, judged by skin, not character, by assumption, not truth. She closed her eyes and felt the pressure build behind them. The tears came, quiet and hot, not from weakness, from exhaustion, from the kind of pain that doesn't show up in medical records. Her phone buzzed on the table. It was a message from Jamal, a fellow vet she kept in touch with. "You okay? Heard something went down on your street." Danielle typed back slowly. "Cops. Thought I was a burglar. Guns out. In my own driveway." The reply came fast. "Jesus. You want me to come by?" Danielle stared at the screen, then typed back. "No. Not now. Just needed to tell someone." She put the phone down and leaned back. The silence in the room felt heavy, but safe. For now. Her eyes drifted back to the photo again. She remembered one mission in particular. Their convoy had taken fire on a dirt road outside Ramadi. Bullets pinged off metal. Her hands had shaken, but her mind stayed sharp. She moved fast, covered a teammate, pulled another to safety. She didn't freeze. She didn't panic. But today, in her driveway, she had frozen, not because she didn't know what to do, but because she knew exactly what could happen. Too many names, too many funerals, Too many hashtags. Philando, Sandra, Tamir, Brianna, and Danielle Rucker had almost been another one. Not on a battlefield, but at home, with a water bottle in her hand and her dogs by her side. That thought made her stomach twist. She looked down at Nova and Rex, her protectors, her family, her anchor. They had sensed the danger before she could name it, not from their training, but from something deeper, something that lives in every Black home, the understanding that safety is often temporary, that even peace can be interrupted. Danielle whispered, "Good job, girl." "Good boy, Rex." Nova licked her hand gently. Danielle wiped her eyes and stood up. She walked to the small wooden box on her bookshelf. Inside was her medal, one of many. She had never shown them off, never felt like she needed to. Her service wasn't about glory, but today she opened the box and held it in her hand. Not as proof to the world, but as a reminder to herself. I have value, I have honor, and I do not need to prove it to anyone. Still, the pain lingered. Not just fear, but rage, the quiet kind, the one that simmers below the surface. Danielle wasn't just shaken. She was tired. Tired of having to be calm to survive. Tired of having to be polite in the face of guns. Tired of wondering what might have happened if Nova hadn't stepped forward. Because that pause, that half second where the officers froze, might have saved her life. A dog had made them see what her voice could not. That thought hit her hard. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed the medal back in the box. The ghosts of combat had followed her home. But this wasn't a war zone. This was supposed to be her safe space, her healing ground. Instead, it was just another battlefield. 2 days passed. Danielle hadn't left her house since the incident. Not because she was afraid. She'd faced worse. But because she was watching, listening, processing. She noticed things she hadn't before. The way her white neighbor, Mrs. Carlton, peeked out her window every time Danielle stepped onto her porch. How Mr. Halver, who usually waved good morning from his car, now drove by without looking up. Even the mail carrier seemed extra polite, too careful, too quick to leave. The weight of the situation hadn't disappeared. It had settled, thick and quiet like fog. But Danielle wasn't one to stay still for long. On the third morning, she slipped into her boots, tied her jacket, and stepped outside with Rex and Nova at her sides. It was time for a walk, not to clear her head, but to show her face. She wasn't going to shrink because others were uncomfortable with her existence. As she walked, Danielle thought back to the moment when the officers froze. That second, the second Nova stepped forward, had changed everything. That memory came back to her now in slow motion. Danielle could still feel the heat of the sun on her neck, the taste of metal in her mouth, the kind of fear that coils in your stomach like a snake, ready to strike. She hadn't told the officers to stop, but Nova had. She hadn't told Rex to move, but he had. They had been trained to obey, but also to protect. And on that day, they had done both. Rex hadn't barked, hadn't growled, just moved forward like a shield of muscle and calm. Nova, though, Nova had locked eyes with the lead officer and growled deep from her chest. It wasn't loud, but it wasn't uncertain. That sound wasn't just warning, it was a line in the sand. Danielle remembered watching the officer's face shift, from aggression to hesitation. He had seen something in Nova's eyes that he hadn't seen in Danielle's voice. Danger, control, consequences. That pause had given Danielle enough time to speak, to breathe, to live. And it wasn't lost on her, not for a second, that it had taken the growl of a dog to make men with guns see her as human. Now walking through the neighborhood with her dogs by her side, Danielle held her head high, but her mind still burned. What if Nova hadn't growled? What if they hadn't hesitated? What if her dogs had been seen as weapons and not protectors? It could have ended differently. Blood on the grass, sirens screaming, another name in the news, another photo shared in grief. Danielle stopped walking and looked down at her two companions. Nova stared ahead, alert as always. Rex scanned the sidewalk calmly, his body language strong but relaxed. "You two saved me," she whispered. She knelt down, hugging them both at once, her arms buried in their thick fur. They leaned into her gently, and for a moment all the tension melted. They didn't know what a news report was. They didn't understand racism, but they knew danger, and they knew her. And they had acted, not out of fear, but out of love. Danielle stood again. Her walk continued, step by step, through the neighborhood. Some people turned away, others stared. One woman actually crossed the street. It didn't matter. She was no longer trying to be small. Let them see her. Let them wonder. Let them question. She had survived worse. She passed the corner where the first police car had turned in. That moment replayed in her mind again. The sound of tires screeching, the yelling, the instant judgment. It had taken her years to build a life of peace. It had taken 5 minutes to feel like it could all disappear. Later that evening, Danielle sat in her backyard. A fire pit crackled gently beside her. She had music playing low. Soft jazz, a station her father used to listen to. She stared up at the stars and let her thoughts settle. Nova laid across her feet. Rex sat at her side. Danielle reached for her phone and opened her camera roll. There it was. A photo she had taken just a week before. Her and the dogs sitting by a lake, laughing, sunlight behind them. No fear, no fight, no danger, just joy. She posted it online with a short caption. "These two saved my life, not overseas, not in battle, right here at home, in my own driveway. Be careful what you fear and who you choose to see." She didn't expect much, but within an hour the post had over 500 shares. People were commenting, reaching out, veterans, dog handlers, black mothers, white neighbors, former police officers, even strangers from across the country. Her story was spreading, not because she wanted attention, but because she needed truth. And Nova's growl, Rex's stance, her calm in chaos. It had all spoken louder than any words could. By the next morning, Danielle's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Her post had gone viral, not in a flashy, overnight celebrity way, but in a deep, resonating way. People weren't just liking it. They were reading every word, sharing it, talking about it. Some had been through something similar. Some had never realized how dangerous a moment like that could be, just for existing while black. Some just left words of support. "Thank you for your service. I'm so sorry you went through this." And then there were others. Cold comments from anonymous profiles, calling her dramatic, questioning the story, asking why she made it about race. Danielle didn't engage. She had said what she needed to say, but she noticed which comments came first. The ones that believed her, that felt her pain. They came from people who had lived some version of it. And the ones that denied it, they came from people who would never have to. Later that day, she heard a knock at her front door. Danielle opened it carefully. Rex and Nova stood behind her, silent but watching. It was Officer Ramirez, the senior officer who had arrived late to the incident, the one who had promised to review everything. He wasn't in uniform today, just jeans and a collared shirt. He looked different without the badge, more human, less armored. "Miss Rucker," he said, nodding. "Officer," she replied flatly. "I'm not here in any official capacity," he said. "I just wanted to update you and also say something face to face." She didn't invite him in, but she stepped outside onto the porch. He continued, "We reviewed the 911 call. It was made by a woman 2 houses down. She didn't recognize you, said you looked suspicious because of the dogs, said she thought you were breaking in." Danielle narrowed her eyes. "I've lived here for 2 years, and I've walked those dogs every day." "I know," he said, nodding. She admitted she never introduced herself. She assumed. She said she was scared. Danielle folded her arms. Funny how easily fear becomes an excuse for racism. Ramirez looked uncomfortable. "We're speaking to her. She'll be held accountable for the false report." Danielle raised an eyebrow. "Will she? Or will you just tell her to be more careful next time?" He hesitated. "We're filing it. It'll go on record." "And your officers," she asked, "the ones who aim weapons at a black veteran on her own property?" There was a pause. "We're conducting internal reviews," he said. "They'll be required to undergo additional training. Bias response. De-escalation." Danielle let out a bitter laugh. "Training won't fix what's broken if the heart isn't willing." He looked down at his hands, then slowly met her eyes again. "I know. I've seen it too many times," he said. "I didn't come here to defend what happened. I came to say you were right. You were calm. You were brave. And we were wrong." Danielle didn't say thank you. Not because she was rude, but because accountability wasn't a gift. It was owed. "Did you watch the body cam footage?" she asked. "I did," he said. "And I watched the moment that dog stepped forward." The moment everyone froze, Danielle nodded slowly. "That wasn't just a dog. That was Nova, my protector. That growl, it might have saved me." He looked toward the driveway, where Nova now stood watching them. "She knew," he whispered. "She always knows," Danielle replied. That evening, Danielle received a call from a local news station. "We'd like to talk about what happened," the reporter said. "Your story is powerful, and people need to hear it." Danielle agreed, but on one condition, that it wouldn't just be about her. "I'll talk," she said, "but I want space to speak about every black person who doesn't have military dogs, who doesn't have medals, who doesn't get to walk away." The reporter paused, then agreed. The interview was emotional. The footage of her walking with Rex and Nova was powerful. The anchor called it a moment that shook our community. The next day, the mayor released a statement. The police chief promised reforms, but Danielle remained cautious. Public apologies didn't always mean public change. Still, something else began to happen. Kids in the neighborhood who used to look away now waved at her as she walked past. One teenage girl shyly approached her while she was out with Nova. "Miss Rucker?" she asked softly. Danielle smiled. "That's me. My mom showed me your video. She said you were in the army, that you're brave." Danielle knelt down. "I'm just a woman who loves her dogs, and I believe everyone deserves to feel safe." The girl nodded. "I want to be like you when I grow up." Danielle's throat tightened. She reached out and gently squeezed the girl's hand. "Then promise me something," she said. "Promise you'll never let anyone make you feel small. Not for your skin, not for your voice, not for standing tall." The girl smiled. "I promise." 2 weeks had passed since the day her driveway turned into a battlefield. The air was warmer now, softer, the skies clearer. But inside Danielle Rucker's heart, the storm hadn't fully passed. Some things shift the earth beneath you, and even when the sky clears, the cracks remain. Her story had reached far beyond her neighborhood. National news stations had picked it up. Commentators debated it. Some praised her strength. Others questioned the dog's training or the accuracy of the officer's fear. It didn't surprise her. The world always found a way to explain black pain as someone else's misunderstanding. But Danielle wasn't interested in defending her truth. She had lived it, and now she was doing something with it. In a quiet community center across town, Danielle stood at the front of a small room. Behind her was a projector screen. In front of her sat a group of women, Black, Latina, Asian, white, veterans, students, mothers, daughters. Some came with service dogs. Some came with nothing but stories and scars. Danielle took a breath and began. I didn't survive war to come home and be hunted, she said. I didn't train to protect this country just to be treated like a suspect because I walked my dogs in my own yard. Heads nodded, eyes welled up. She continued, but what happened to me? It wasn't just about me. It was about all of us. Because too many of us know that fear of being seen as a threat when all we want is to live in peace. She shared her story calmly, truthfully, without dramatics. She spoke about the fear, the hesitation in the officer's hands, the power of Nova's growl, and the shame that followed. Then she paused and said the part that mattered most. We should not have to earn respect through uniforms or medals or dog tags. We deserve it because we are human. The room went quiet, not from discomfort, but reverence. That night, Danielle launched a local outreach initiative. She called it Guardians at Home, a support group for Black veterans, a network for service dog handlers, a place where fear could be unlearned and stories could be told. At home, life settled again. Danielle still took morning walks with Rex and Nova, but now people greeted her more often, not out of guilt, but with growing awareness. Even Mrs. Carlton, the woman who had made the call, eventually came to the door one afternoon. Danielle opened it slowly. Mrs. Carlton's face was pale, nervous. She held a small plant in her hands, something leafy in a clay pot. I I came to say I'm sorry, she said. I assumed. I panicked. I judged you by the wrong thing. Danielle looked at the plant, then into the woman's trembling eyes. I'm not going to thank you, she said, but I accept your apology. If you really want to fix this, come to the next community meeting. Listen. Learned Mrs. Carlton nodded. I will. That night Danielle sat outside again. The stars were out, the same stars she'd stared at from a tent in the Middle East, the same stars she'd looked to the night she came home from deployment, the same stars above her that night the guns were pointed. She leaned back in her chair and watched them now, not in fear but with hope. Rex and Nova lay at her feet. Nova let out a soft huff and looked up at her. Danielle smiled. Still watching out for me, huh? Nova's tail wagged once. I'm watching out for you too, Danielle whispered. All of us. I won't stop. And she meant it, because this wasn't just a story of fear. It was a story of standing tall, of turning trauma into purpose, of two loyal dogs and one brave woman who refused to shrink. And even when the storm passed, the strength remained. Have you ever been judged before someone even knew your name? How did you respond? And what would you say to someone going through it now?